You are all set.
Okay, so we will start the December 7th, 2023 Tompkins County Council of Governments meeting. Are there any other introductions? We started early with some introductions. Any others to note or farewells to state? If not, we will just there's been a request. I'm hoping to avoid doing roll calls for votes. That just means that when we do take a vote, if you're a voting member, it would be really, really, really helpful to have your camera on. So if we raise hands, an appropriate counting, and we'll pause when we take a vote, just so that can be noted. So again, I'm hoping to have to avoid doing roll calls. So let's try it. And Taylor, you can help me see if it's working. I don't know that there's going to be too many votes today, but obviously the first one will be starting with the September 28th, 2023 minutes. Would someone like to move approving those minutes? Joe, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Robert. And any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, yes.
Can I also request that if you raise your hand to move or second, you also turn your camera on?
I've got a poor internet link. If I turn my camera on, it'll get all gobbledygook. That's why I'm keeping it off.
Okay, but Joe, you can do the raised hand feature too, right?
Yeah, that seems to be working okay.
Okay.
Okay, Brad, if I could just for a second, just because on our YouTube side, we can't, when people don't have their cameras on, and that's fine, I understand that, Joe, completely. But when people don't have their cameras on, they don't show up on the YouTube stream. So if, like you just did, when he raised his hand, you said, okay, Joe, you moved that. That was great. So if that's what we're gonna do, then I would appreciate having that done moving forward, just for instances like this where it's not great to turn on a camera because we might lose him. So we'll just do that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about the minutes? If not, with all those in favor, raise your hand. And keep them raised for a minute, just so we can see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anyone opposed? And I think Joe's hand's going to come down. Anyone abstaining? So Jordan, did that work?
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to report from county administration. So I received an email from Lisa. She may show up later to the meeting, but several folks from the county are involved in a strategic planning session this afternoon. So she gave me a few things to just update folks on. For those of you who were on the meeting this morning, this will all sound very familiar. So the final voting meeting of the countywide shared services panel will be held Monday, December 11th at 5 via Zoom. A vote will be held at this meeting for the approval of the 2024 shared services plan. All chief elected officials are asked to attend or assign a designee to attend and vote on behalf of their municipality. The 2024 Shared Services Panel includes the pilot countywide rapid medical response program. And I know we'll be talking about that later on. Second, the county strategic operations planning process continues with 2 planning sessions to be held today and tomorrow with county department leadership. These sessions will take the visioning work of the legislature and begin to identify and develop strategic objectives to be included in the county's final strategic operations plan. Third, and some of you I think attended this, so department leadership, legislators, and reps from other governments attended a full-day cybersecurity workshop presented by the New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services on December 5th. I heard a brief report from that. I'm like, oh my gosh, all the things we have to pay attention to. The county IT department, with support from county admin, will take the action items identified during the session and implement in 2024. The Department of Homeland Security emphasized that their services are available to all municipalities. And then you probably aren't going. So if you need the number to call in, if you need to report a cyber incident or to request cyber support, maybe Jordan, if you have those, maybe you can put them in the chat. They're from Lisa's email, so you might just cut and paste that section.
Send those to the TTAG members.
Okay, thank you. Oh, she did. Okay. The county is selling 401 North Tioga Street, known affectionately as the Red House, and will be receiving offers through December 15th. Carol Bushberg is the real estate broker. And last, again, some of you may have participated in this on October 29th. New York State Senator Rachel May convened a regional meeting to discuss the concept of creating a Finger Lakes Commission. This would be modeled after the Tug Hill Commission, which was formed 40 years ago. The purpose would be to help small rural governments with information, education, and technical support on how to govern, may help with support around grant writing, etc. So, and it would include, the Finger Lakes region includes 14 counties. There are some common interests around rural issues, watershed issues, and future pressure on our region around water resources. This is in the very early stages of discussion, and they're looking for feedback about what would and wouldn't be useful in a bill going forward. If it would be ideal to invite Senator May and her staff to a future TCOG meeting to discuss. I think, would people be supportive of inviting her to come to a future meeting and discussing this? So I'm saying yes. Okay, so let's put that on as a future agenda item. And again, Lisa may show up later in the meeting, but we will see. Shauna, I know you're going to be leaving earlier. Is there anything that you want to add to her report?
No, I think she was going to come to speak to the rapid response.
Right.
And I'll try and be here as well.
Okay. So any questions about that report? Not that I can answer them, but any questions about that? Okay. TCOG 2024 leadership. So you remember we have this, it still sometimes feels a little fuzzy to me, the way we identify a vice chair, a secondary chair, and a primary chair. So it's a 3-year term. I believe that this is my final year. So I believe that Joel becomes the primary chair next year. Rorden becomes the secondary chair. And we're here to hopefully nominate a vice chair for 2024. We had sent out an email, and of course, no one responded. Well, I don't know. I think I said to respond to Joel or Rorden, but I don't think Joel or Rorden heard from anyone. Is that correct, Joel and Rorden? Rorden is shaking his head no. Joel, you didn't hear. Well, you and I have had a conversation, so I know Joel didn't hear from anyone. We did reach out to some folks. We do have a name to bring forward to the committee based on some conversations we had. But Joe, I see you have your name up.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the website still lists me as co-chair and Rod as co-chair and Joel as vice chair. So it needs to be updated, please.
Okay. Duly noted for whoever takes care of the website. So is there anyone who wants to have throw their name into the mix before we drum roll and suggest or put forward a name? I didn't think so. So Dan Lamb has said that he would be interested. Oh, wait. Well, and with a caveat. Have you changed your mind, Dan?
Well, I didn't know that put me in the queue to become chair.
Oh, it does. It puts you in a 3-year queue.
I thought I was just, there in case there was some sort of a disaster that knocked out a couple of us and I had to step up.
It puts you in a 3-year queue. I hope that doesn't change your mind too much. I hope it doesn't change your mind at all.
Can I have a day to think about it?
Yes, you may.
I'm not sure I got the bandwidth right now, considering some of my other professional obligations to do what you do so
Well,
well.
I will say, from my perspective, it hasn't been a difficult task because the county staff does such a good job of, behind the scenes, we're emailing back and forth a couple times before an upcoming meeting to review agenda items. And, if I'm certainly this year, there were times I had to be absent and Joel just kicked in and chaired
Yeah.
the meeting. So it's not too difficult.
Okay.
Let me just chip in here and say, you chair a few meetings, when you're the actual chair. But half the time Rod did it because I had trouble getting, email or getting internet access enough to be able to do it. And it's like 4 or 5 emails a month to kind of help set up the meeting. And you've got 2 other people who are helping you through the entire process for all 3 years. So it's not a huge burden.
Makes it sound easy.
It is.
Fine.
So you don't need a day to think about it.
No, we'll go ahead.
Okay. So one little caveat though. So if we vote Dan in as vice chair, I do know that Dan has a conflict with I think you told me this, Dan. Is that
This is
correct?
not a small conflict, but yeah, this is a conflict. I
Uh,
I generally teach at this time. Classes are out, so I'm here. But so for a few months in the spring and a few months in the fall, would have to defer to the vice chair, I guess.
And Dan, it's likely that our first meeting would be January 26th if we follow the same schedule. Well, classes have already started by January 26th. Okay. And what time does it start, the class?
2:55, 2:55, 4:10.
Okay. So so just know that that's something that I don't think it's going to be a big issue perhaps this next year because it wouldn't involve every meeting, but it just might mean that we look at the schedule for 2025 and 2026 and see if there's some tweaks to do that. Is that fair to say?
And that's
So-
why you have 2 other people on your team to help fill in those meetings that you can't come to. It's really a shared job.
All right.
So with that, would someone like to move having Dan Land become the vice chair for 2024? It looks like Joe Wetmore is moving that resolution. And it looks like Ronnie, people keep jumping right there. Ronnie Hardaway is seconding that motion. Any questions or comments? So Dan, thank you for this. So all those in favor of Dan is coming on in 2024 as vice chair, please raise your hand. I see Joe Wetmore's hand is raised, but I think everyone else has their camera on. So Jordan, tell me when you are set.
We are all set. Thank you so much.
Okay, anyone no or abstaining?
I abstain, right? Isn't that the polite thing?
You can vote for yourself.
No, yes.
They roped you right in there, Dan.
Seems
So,
so self-serving.
So Dan, would you like to be noted as abstaining?
No, I'll go ahead and vote in the affirmative.
Okay.
Yes.
So congratulations, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Do I give a speech now?
No.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was never about me. This is about you.
Okay. Moving on to reports, presentations, and updates. We'll start with a building code administration and operations study update.
I'll kick it off, Ben, before you jump in. It's Darby here, over here in Ledge Chambers.
Hey, Darby.
Sorry, I'm so tiny. Yeah, so welcome to our folks from LaBerge Group, Ben Seiden, Robert Rakel, and Kathleen Rooney have been working very hard this past year, gathering information from all the municipalities and pulling that together and are here today not yet with the final report, but with a set of recommendations and just about the process that we've been going through over the past year. And then it'll be wrapped up in the next month or so, and we'll have a final report coming out in early 2024. So turn it over to you guys from LaBerge Group.
Thank you, Darby. I know you said you're tiny back there, but you may be small on the screen, but you're big in our hearts. Welcome back.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks.
And I want to thank you for pointing out Kathleen and Rob from our team. They've been instrumental and critical in developing our draft and final report for you all. You can't see my screen. Am I able to share my screen? I am. Look at that. Can everyone see my screen? Just somebody say yes or no.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. It's like one of those presentations. You sit in front of a group of 100 people and you say in the back row, "Can you hear me?" And then no one raises their hand and nobody says anything. You failed to realize that your colleague paid everyone $5 to keep their mouth shut. So you keep going. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? This happened to me. It's a true story. It's a true story. So, Darby, thank you very much for having us here today. I know that we only have about 15 minutes to go over at a high level what we've been working on for the last year. But I want to remind everyone that Tompkins County, as the county government, took the lead in developing a process in which all the communities in the county from a bottom-up approach can work together to look at identifying methods, areas, and concepts in the code enforcement and building inspection environment that can improve effectiveness and efficiencies countywide. And when we use the word countywide, it's because it includes all the municipalities and different strategies, different initiatives, and different objectives. But it's not countywide in where the county is providing the service or taking over the services. That's key. Because at the beginning of the process, we realized very quickly that code enforcers are very important to the localities. They have an insurmountable amount of knowledge of each of their communities, easy access by residents and building owners and businesses. And they were this whole process was never developed so the county can take over the entire process of code enforcement. Rather, the program that we undertook over the last year was to identify areas of similarities, challenges for localities and code enforcers, identify opportunities where together there can be a shared approach and considerations for how to do things either more effective or more efficient or cheaper for residents and businesses and for the county and for the towns and villages, and see how we can integrate those opportunities, those initiatives with local zoning, planning, and codes. We recognize quickly, though, that the code enforcers already work together, and US TCOG have worked often with code enforcers around the county to realize this. They already have a strong willingness to work together. They cover for each other. They share workload when they're on vacation or ill or even vacant when seats are vacant. And there's already a good wealth of information and knowledge available to you as local leaders. But we realized during the process there are many fiscal challenges that you as our leaders, our mayors, our supervisors, and the county are facing. External pressures to do more with less. And code enforcement was one area where you can actually identify 6 or 7 strategies where you can fine tune the service delivery model, support your code enforcers, and build upon the infrastructure that you have already in place. Where we are in the process is, as Darby mentioned, we have completed a draft study. The study approach was collaborative. It was bottom up. We had a very effective and engaged steering committee, which we'll go through in a little while. We identified some low cost solutions that hopefully will give you a bigger rate of return on your investment. We had an active steering committee, as I mentioned before. We've had 5 meetings so far to date. We have a 6th one coming up at the end of this process where we finalize and provide the final plan to everyone. The initial planning process was pretty linear. We start with a research of data collection and we analyze that data. We have reviewed your current operations. We compared each of the communities that we had, and we aggregated those numbers and those budgets and those costs and those programs across the county. We learned from the code enforcers as to what they have done before. We have I mentioned before, but a very knowledgeable base of code enforcers who have been doing this collectively over hundreds of years. So they were able to bring their own ideas to the table before we even started the data analysis. When we started with the stakeholder engagement, and we mentioned when we met with you all last year, and Darby released our scope of services, that this was going to be a very engaged process. We had a series of questionnaires that we gave out to the chief elected officials, the municipal planners, and the code enforcers. We had 6 roundtables last year in January, over 2 days, where we met with, again, the chief elected officials and separately the CEOs, the code enforcers. And we did that not because we wanted to divide and conquer, but we wanted each of you, from the elected officials, to provide your insight from your position, and then the code enforcers from their position. At the end of the process, we brought everyone together again, and they worked together in an exercise, town by town, village by village. In our roundtables, though, we also invited the municipal planners, those folks that are integral in interfacing between code enforcement, land use, zoning, building permits, and the general public. We did have two groups of community stakeholders because we wanted to see how the community felt about code enforcement in Tompkins County. And it's interesting, as we go through some of the slides, there are a lot of similarities. There were a lot of items that were highlighted that were strengths of the system you have currently. There's a lot of support for the code enforcers that you have, but there were some challenges that were identified on all levels, some commonality in those challenges, and some opportunities that came out of those conversations. In May, we brought back our findings to the chief elected officials, again, the CEOs and the planners. And in August, we met with the code enforcers just to go over the preliminary recommendations that we had, the initiatives that bubbled up to the top, and get their take and also their buy-in on some of those initiatives to see, will this work in their community, who and which communities will be involved in the process, and the final analysis, where to go from there. We also utilized a ranking process for municipalities to determine what was important to them with those initiatives, and would they buy in, would they join in the process of implementing some of these. When we went through the initial strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and by the way, you all have a copy of this presentation. Kathy shared it with the committee and with the county. So I know we only have 15 minutes. I'm not going to read each part of it. It'll be available for you for download. And when the reports around are available, you have that as well. But I really want to focus on some of the strengths, which was your experienced CEOs. Your CEOs already, as I mentioned, shared services, have a knowledge base, but also have a mastery of the building inspection and code enforcement library of information. What I mean by that is there are books and books and books of regulations, and your code enforcers know that those books like the back of their own hands, and they're able to deploy the state rules, regulations in your communities very, very well. And the developers acknowledge that. There was no negativity towards the code enforcement officers. However, there were a number of weaknesses that were highlighted amongst the analysis, amongst the feedback, amongst the surveys, amongst the public, which really highlighted on the lack of code enforcers, the turnover, the limited number of people, or the pipeline to come into code enforcement, and the competing demands of the code enforcers, both those that are in the codes and those that are foisted upon them by their multiple roles in community governance, meaning that the code enforcers are not only interpreting and implementing the state code, often they're also involved in land use and in zoning and energy code and other programs that the county and the state have and the towns have foisted on them in their roles and responsibilities. The complexity of the codes have made it more challenging. The lack of code enforcers in the pipeline have made it more challenging. The length of time it takes to get a code enforcer up and running is a challenge. However, there were some opportunities that really bubbled to the top, and those form the basis for the recommendations as we go through. I mentioned earlier some of the challenges, but these are really two highlighted pieces that came to the forefront of the discussions. Staff turnover with the inability for succession planning and extended vacancies, and the expanded workloads of the CEO community and the concerns they have within this. And we had to take this information across the board, from the part-timers to the full-timers. Each town is different. You know, Lansing and Ithaca had the more robust code enforcement departments, and some of the villages and towns in the southern part of the county had very lean operations. But across the board, the staff turnover and the vacancies and the lack of a pipeline for new officers really hit home as to what can you do going forward, whether it's collectively, whether it's regionally, or whether it's countywide for those pipelines. The workloads really really came up as well, because not only the permit process, but the level and the new initiatives that the state's foisting on everybody, the energy code, the different codes you have, and the county and the towns, that's also added to the amount of work each CEO has to provide as they move forward with their jobs, again, limiting how many things they can do going forward. The uniform code keeps changing. It's becoming more and more complex as we move forward. And we can't change that. That's a state initiative. We can only react to the complexity of the codes. And I do know that, again, our code enforcers, your code enforcers, know the system very well, but they have to keep learning. And that learning process is also a challenge, because training, availability of training, cost of training, that's all changing, and it's a moving target. And you have a regional board of code enforcers that are working very hard to share in that, to provide the training, but we have to figure out ways to move forward. And that came up as one of our initiatives. And then there were some levels of challenges that popped up during our initial data gathering and stakeholder interviews. And that was inconsistencies across municipal operations. Because you all have home rule, you're all different, you all have your own local rules and regulations on top of what occurs at the state level. There's invariably going to be differences in municipal operations. However, from the developer side, the public side, that work in many towns and villages in the county, things came up that could be addressed by this board as you go forward. One is technology. Others are permit application processes, the level of documentation required by municipalities, fee schedules, scheduling, even prosecution and presentment across the municipalities comes up as the differences, and the inconsistencies make it challenging for those that want to do business or build and develop in the county. When we came through the process, we finalized our initial data gathering. We had basically boiled down the process or the recommendations to 6 priority strategy areas that are recommended for development and implementation. We also identified 2 areas for alternative approaches moving forward, and had a set of 5 recommendations that were recommended for reconsideration in the future. We recognize that sometimes when you develop a plan of action, it's not good to have 20 or 30 recommendations you'll never get to. We really want to focus on the top 6 priorities that you as a county, you and individual towns and villages, or even regions can work on together. And those 6 strategies came into, I've got a very fast finger here, centralizing 911 addressing, countywide building permit software systems, creating a pipeline of code enforcement officers and building safety inspectors, looking at creating a shared court presentment and prosecution system. The 5th one was establishing specialized services and a technical assistance program. And finally, some municipal shared staffing. And any of these projects, by the way, can be selected by you as TCOG or by the county as a 2025 shared service if you wanted to. And I bring that up because you had spoke, Rod, about how the county shared service initiative plan is going to be reviewed and adopted next week. And you do that annually. I want to commend Tompkins County, because there are very few counties that are still doing their countywide shared service initiative program. They're adopting them annually. And you recognize if you only have 1 or 2 projects per year, any savings in those projects per year, you're going to get back as a grant. So as you look at doing next year's plan, any of these projects want to bubble to the top, you can use them both in a local government efficiency grant in July, or you can use it in your countywide shared services plan for 2025 and really game the system, use the system. If you recall, if you put something in a plan and don't do it, you don't get any money for it in the future. So pick which project of these you want to put into next year's plan, and you can implement that and get some money out of the state government. But going through these processes, the 911 addressing system came up as a huge issue that the county can provide leadership, direction, and assistance on. What we call DOER, County Department of Emergency Response, will be assuming a 911 addressing for the entire county. So the building inspectors, the code enforcers can work directly with the 911 and with the DOER to be able to identify the names and the addresses that you can then put into your subdivisions going forward. It's going to result in improved emergency response for 911. It's also going to reduce the duplication effort by each of the code enforcers and building inspectors as they're providing the addresses. So be one central repository instead of going back and forth, having conflicts amongst communities, especially when you have the same names. The county can provide that with the current staff they have right now. Another strategy came out really focused on your software and technology. We recognize quickly that there are a number of communities in your county that already have very robust systems. We don't recommend that you have one system countywide, but there were 4 different county systems in place, plus regular Excel, Word, and paper, and one system where the county was working with their Laserfiche. Kathleen held a roundtable with many of the communities that were interested in doing a joint software package, and they spoke to a number of the vendors, and a couple of these software packages are really piquing the interest of the communities that are involved. The initiative would entail the creation of a RFP to identify the shared software system, and then a rollout to those communities that are interested. And I want to highlight when I mentioned those that are interested. Earlier on, I said this is a bottom-up approach, not a top-down approach. What we mean by that is the county is not going to force the entire county to get on one system. With the shared code enforcement software management system, those that want to participate will be asked to participate, join in the system, join in the RFP. Kathleen had identified that iCloud Permit is one of the systems that is really beginning to pique the interest of some of the communities due to the low entry cost and the low cost moving forward. But the result of having a shared system really is found in standardization and workflow efficiencies, improved communication, and standardization across those communities that are involved, and cross coverage. And I mentioned cross coverage because if you're on a shared system or a similar system for IT or tech, a code enforcer in an emergency can jump into the next community easily and work in their community, issue the building permits, or review what's happening without a loss of information. This happened in many communities where towns and villages begin sharing. Having that joint system or software allows you to use technology to move right in to providing the service to the residents. Strategy 3 focused on creation of a pipeline for code enforcement officers and building inspectors, and really focus on developing a recruitment toolkit.
Ben,
Yes.
you might have to skip a few things just in the interest of time. Still give the good overview.
How about we have 6 strategies. They highlighted on several different points of interest, of challenges and opportunities provided by the committee. Each one will have separate initiatives and results that will yield efficiencies in service provision, cost savings to the communities, and reduce redundancy and create opportunities to share across municipal boundaries. Behind here on your sheet, you'll have 6 more opportunities to review a little bit more in depth of each of the initiatives, and the report will be available within a month.
And I didn't mean to, if you want to quickly show the other slides, go ahead. I just wanted
No, that's okay. The other slides are really the backup to this slide.
Okay.
So what we did, Rod, and you have them, you can download them or read them at your leisure. Each one of the slides goes into one page on each strategy, which is initially what I'm saying in my last one. I'm paraphrasing 6 slides into one for you. But each slide here will go through some of the assumptions that we used, the approach and the benefits for the 911, for the software management system. In the software system, we mentioned iCloud. On the recruitment efforts for strategy 3 for the pipeline, we were going to talk about how they're working with the county human resources and civil service, you're able to streamline and centralize your recruitment. Some of the challenges that have to get overcome are job descriptions and titles, looking at how we can recruit new and young. I don't want to use the word younger because it's not an age issue, but we do want to recruit some individuals that are still in high school that are looking for non-traditional ways of going into the workforce, and introduce them to what code enforcement means, where their skill sets can be used. We want to identify in the pipeline workers and laborers that want to retire from actively building and constructing, but want to still work for communities in the field of construction. We want to look at our community colleges for pathways and really work with the unions and with the trade schools to identify a pool of quality candidates to go forward. And then finally, we have the strategy 4 was a shared core presentment and prosecution. It was identified that many of the communities don't have the resources in-house or either the skill set, the resources, or the availability to present and court and file challenges. So we recommend at this point having a shared presentment and prosecution, looking at volume of cases 1 to 5 per municipality per year. And it's really to augment the expertise of the CEOs you have on the ground. Strategy 5 was to identify specialized code enforcement services, look at creating a team that can go almost like this. You contact the county, I have this issue whether it's electrical or plumbing or building, and I need a specialized expert that I don't have in my town. We want there to be an opportunity to have a pool of resources that you all can pull from and go forward. And that would be a shared service grant to give you the resources to do that. We want to look at the third-party electrical inspections and see we understood that there's a number of individuals that are retiring shortly. There's a gap in that resource. So having a shared service or pool of electrical inspectors or plumbing inspectors will be a benefit to the smaller communities. And finally, the strategy 6 was really municipal to municipal shared staffing, how we can work together, intermunicipal relationships or partnerships based upon titles and hours, how we can share with code enforcers, how we can back each other up, how we can use cooperative agreements or IMAs to be able to provide those services for each other. So it's seamless. If there's a backlog, a vacation, an illness, or a vacancy, where there's seamless transition for shared service will be available to you all. All those are just the initial 6 areas of initiatives that will be available in the report coming out next month. With that, I have Kathleen and Robert here to answer any and all questions you guys have.
Then would you just go to the one last slide, please? Thank you.
You want to take it?
No, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You asked for it.
Yeah, so based on the nature of the strategy areas that are proposed, we really feel strongly that a temporary facilitation component would be really essential to make a lot of these actions happen. Based on the fact that we really tried to design things that were really low in cost but could give you some high return, they're more in the ops area, which really does need that ongoing facilitation to get them going and up and off the ground. So we really do feel strongly about that. And we feel that there's 3 initiatives that support the overall project that really are slightly separate from the strategies, but are small, but are really essential to support. And that is really thinking through the development of a uniform permit application and documentation list. That we heard that from a number of the code enforcement officers, as well as from the development community. And there are ways of tailoring it, the specific needs of a community, but creating some baseline pieces that are the same, just for efficiency purposes, would be, I think, of significant value. The second one is we really saw through the dialogues and communications across stakeholder groups that the issues of data exchange are important to everyone. And if we could focus some energy on identification of what those data exchange needs are, and then from that develop how the workflows of how those pieces of data or access to data can be accomplished across systems. I think that would really go a long way to creating long-term efficiencies. And then the third piece is just the facilitation around processes between code enforcement officers and county departments, and within county departments that touch and impact land use. An example I'll give you is the definition of the sizing of a septic system. It hits environmental health, it hits assessment, it hits the code enforcement officers, potentially zoning, and the planning processes. And just so how can we create the workflow processes that the things just automatically flow, and decision making is supported through some potentially just tweaked processes.
Okay, thanks for pointing out the facilitator. often countywide plans or any plan for that matter, whether it's a comprehensive plan, strategic plan, they fall flat if you don't have somebody assigned to begin doing that work, somebody assigned to facilitate the initiative moving forward. So that was a recommendation throughout the plan, that this committee and the county and the municipalities work together to figure out who should be assigned to be that part-time, temporary, get that project up and running piece. And it can be one project, it can be an intern, just somebody has to be assigned to be able to do that, to begin the process with you all. So you all have many hats, many different jobs, and if no one's assigned to it, it's not going to move forward. So thank you for bringing that up.
It could also be built in if you were going to do an LGE grant, and maybe a small piece of the LGE grant could support it going forward into 25, depending on which of these strategies you folks really would like to endeavor upon.
Timing of that, folks, last Friday of July is always the end of CFA. So you can put in a grant at that point through the local government efficiency program to fund one of your projects. You would find out typically in December of the following year, and then you can have some funding in there for 2025, as Kathy mentioned.
So thank you for your thoughtful approach to this issue. You know, we could probably take 45 minutes to talk about this and answer questions. We're not going to do that because we have a number of other issues, but are there one or two issues? And Darby, do you want to emphasize any next steps?
I just would note that we've already had some of the demos, and so that's moving along. And I think we've had some good responses from the municipalities participating in those. And we have recordings. So if you, I know we've been sharing those with the code enforcement officers. But if anyone has questions about the vendor demos, we do have recordings of those.
And I think just following up on what Darby was saying, you know, if you were to look at what one thing would be the most transformative for smaller communities, I might suggest thinking about the contemporary workflow software packages. They have profound elements that really can speak to the needs, particularly of the small shop. The workflow components, the automation elements of it, the automated notifications, the automated creation of documents, the automated filing of things can become a really transformative efficiency tool, particularly for small agencies. And I think the time right now is excellent because I think you're seeing the price points of these systems materially changing. And I think some vendors moving into New York State that have price points that might be affordable for smaller communities. And so if that's probably our parting piece, that from an efficiency perspective, particularly as folks are struggling with these really crushing workloads, I can't tell you the stories we've heard from your code officers. It might be something to take a look at. The town of Groton has gone with a particular vendor that has a lot of those workflow tools. They could probably be a very good small community example for you folks to look at. And their pricing was around $3,600 a year. And that's certainly a lot less than, you know, another position.
Well,
So,
Kath, you were mentioning how that software package would work off of an iPad or a tablet, and the majority of the work that can get done is right there, from taking the pictures, importing it into the reports, printing the reports, emailing the reports, scheduling it. If something occurs right there and they approve it, or they automatically get emailed with the approval, the speed, the accuracy, and the efficiency is unbelievable just in that one.
they'll do the calculation.
I am gonna, so that's good, okay, but we do need to, let's
Okay.
just take one or two questions. So Joe Wetmore has his hand up.
Yeah, you mentioned that we have a copy of this report, but I don't think it's been sent out to the whole committee. Is that going to happen after the meeting?
We're sending a draft to Darby and the county, and the final report will be available in about a month.
Okay.
But and the slides, Joe, they were just sent out right before the meeting. So we'll get that sent to the TCOG group after the meeting. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Just for a point of clarity, the only thing that will go in the packet are the slides.
Yeah.
not what comes in the future.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah, thanks. Yep.
Got that. We understand that.
Yeah.
One last question? Ben, and Kathy, thank you. Sorry that we had to cut you short a little bit, but I think looks like it's a very thorough report, and there's, all of us can go back and have ongoing conversations with our code enforcement officers, to see how we might move forward. So
I
thank you very much.
appreciate that. When you get the slides, the last slide is our phone number. So if you do have additional questions that weren't able to be asked during this conversation, feel free to reach out to Kathleen, myself, or Rob.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody. Happy holidays.
As we continue through reports, presentation, and updates, I just want to make sure that folks saw that Nick Hemholt sent out a broadband update via email, just because we had a full agenda. So I just wanted to make sure that people saw that. Moving on, I think this is Darby as well, priority trail strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Definitely my hat switching here from code enforcement now to priority trails. So our department, working with Fernando and the Transportation Council, we spent the year updating the priority trail strategy so that we had one originally written in 2024. The strategy is about 20 pages and it is in your packet. Starting, I think, on page 9 is I have a brief memo, and then the 20-page draft priority strategy is in there. And we get a lot of questions of like, well, why are there only 5 trails listed in this? And we really base what we call priority trails on some documents from the 1990s that sketched out a countywide network of multi-use trails. And so the focus has really been on the trails that, multi-use, meaning not just foot traffic, but also bicycles, and in some cases, equestrian uses that cross municipal boundaries. And we know that there are, over 70 or more trails within Tompkins County, but we really wanted to focus on these networks that can be getting people through and across the county, and then also focusing on the ones that are seeing work being done. So, there are some goals in the community to have some other trails, but we really focus on the ones that have been seeing some actions, things have been accomplished, and then those that have some things that still need to be completed. So we focused on the Dryden Rail Trail, the South Hill Recreation Way extension, the Black Diamond Trail, and we know the bulk of the Black Diamond Trail is complete, but looking towards an extension to Trumansburg, and then the connection between Buttermilk and Robert Treeman State Parks. Another section is the urban connectors, and then finally, the one that's not a multi-use trail, it's a foot traffic only, is the Finger Lakes Trail, and we include that as part of this because it is such a regional asset that we have this 1,000-mile trail that crosses through our county. So, we do identify some actions in there. So the document, short and sweet, and just focuses on what's going on, who's been involved, the recent accomplishments, and then what are some of the actions or, key barriers that are needed to or we see to making progress. So, it's not necessarily a county document. It's all of your documents who've been participating in this. So I appreciate all the work that the municipalities have been doing. So we're just bringing it to you at this point. If you have any questions or comments, and the next steps that we have, we did bring a draft to the Peak Committee, Planning, Energy, Environmental Quality Committee back in October. We're going to bring it back to Peak later this month at their December 18th meeting for then legislature approval after that. So I'll just give people, you've had the documents in the packet, and just say if you have any questions or comments, if you can get them to me in the next day or two, so we can get the final draft out to Peak in the next week. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Rod.
Darby. Let me just make sure. Anyone have any quick questions about that? Okay, moving on to Haley to talk about electric vehicle charging as a service.
Okay, give me just a second to get this sharing. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Haley Delisle, the Sustainability Coordinator for Tompkins County. And I'm coming to you with a potential idea of doing electric vehicle charging as a service throughout the county with participation from all of you. So in this presentation, we're going to go over what is EV charging as a service. I'll talk about the opportunity, and then if you're interested, what the next steps are. So electric vehicle charging as a service. This idea was really born out of an RFP that Ulster County released recently. And essentially they brought, their municipalities brought a couple of addresses that they had land use authority over to the county. The county released an RFP looking for developers who would essentially come in and install EV chargers on those properties and provide EV charging. There are a couple of different models of which this could look like. And you know, by providing an address, you're not agreeing to any of those models. It's very open. But first would be a revenue shared model. So there could be an opportunity for municipalities to get a cut of the revenue that is generating from folks using the charger. Another one could be a type of subscription fee where the municipality would pay to have this as a service there, and they wouldn't have to pay any networking fees. And then kind of the last one is a turnkey solution, which essentially the developer would come in, install the EV charger, take care of all the networking, all of the subscription, but there would be no revenue back to the municipality. So it would just essentially be a service that is provided. So the opportunity here would be to release a countywide RFP. This could help us negotiate better rates or terms. Some more benefits would be creating a more robust charging network throughout the county. And it would also create some continuity throughout the county. So if you're a non-Tesla EV driver, you know that there are a lot of different apps for different charging networks, and it can be confusing and frustrating. So having the continuity throughout the county could be a benefit. If this is something that you are interested in, I would encourage you to email me. I'm looking for land use, like municipalities who have land use authority to email me specific addresses by January 12th. I will say that we need critical mass to follow through with this RFP. We're hoping to get at least 10 sites so that it would be worth kind of county time, staff time being put into this. And so far we've only heard from 2 municipalities. So we would need a little bit more interest to kind of get us out there and going. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So Haley, can you stop sharing for a minute? That way we can see everyone. And Haley did present, there was an energy committee sponsored a get together last week, and Haley did the same presentation basically. And I know, many of the folks who were part of that were not the elected officials who could say, yeah, our municipality is interested, but I know many were interested. So hopefully they have gone back and had conversations with some of you. So questions for Haley? Mark.
Yeah, just Haley, do you know what model Ulster County used of those 3 models you listed?
Yeah, so Ulster County has gone with the turnkey solution. So they're kind of hands off. They've just provided the sites, and the developer's going to come in, do everything, and it's just going to be a benefit. They're not planning on taking part in any of the revenues.
Mike?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense to me for municipalities. So great, thanks.
Mike?
Will they involve fast chargers? Not the standard one that many of us already have, but will they have the faster chargers?
I think
System.
there is potential for that. We haven't really gotten that far, but it would depend on the municipality's needs or wants. So we're not quite there yet. It could go either way.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, you asked about, does it need to be town-owned property, or could it just, are you interested in getting a list of other properties that might be interested in participating, whether they're private or nonprofit?
I would say, I had this question come up earlier. I would say send me the addresses, but only if you've had a conversation and know that they're likely to kind of be interested. And then I'll take that back.
Great, thank you.
Dan, did you have the same question or a different question?
It's along the lines of that question, but I'm just wondering, Haley, if there have been any studies about where EV users go as opposed to where we think they should go. If you follow what I mean, we can come up with good ideas on where, oh, we could put one at town hall or we could put one at a fire station, but what does the market want? Has there been any study on that you've located?
That's a great question. I haven't come across anything, but I'm sure they exist. I know that I talked with Alice Green from your Dryden, is it Climate Action or something group? And she was saying like the community centers near the rail trails where people are going to be going for a couple hours and like would like to plug in. But I haven't come across anything, but it's something I can take back and look into.
Jill, are you the problem right now? But go ahead, unmute yourself and we'll see if we hear that background noise, Joe.
Yeah, you indicated you need a certain critical mass of locations. Now, is it municipalities that's the critical mass, or actually places to put them? Could you clarify that?
You're hitting me with the tough questions. I think we're looking for 10 sites minimum, but we would like to see as many municipalities participate as possible as well.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Robert, go ahead.
Yes, there was a private company that came to our Enfield Town Board maybe a little more than a year ago and suggested that we allow them a site where they could put EV chargers. They made a presentation to our town board. Nothing ever happened of it. We didn't pursue it. They didn't pursue it. And I wondered, is this along the line of what maybe occurred in Enfield?
I think this is different because we would actually be putting out an RFP. So we would be requesting the proposals to come to us, where that was probably like a cold call. But I do think that the service is similar to what they were probably presenting to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So Haley, remind us the date you hope to hear from us by?
January 12th.
Okay. And of course, Haley has said, if you have questions before you make a commitment or to reach out to her.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I'm happy to meet with anyone as well. I've already started to have a couple meetings, so.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving on to subcommittee and other reports. I'm going to change the order a little bit because I know which ones might take a little bit longer. So I don't, Robert sent out, this is quick, Robert sent out the transportation report. So thank you, Robert.
Yes.
So go ahead and read what Robert sent out about that.
I have one update.
Okay, go ahead.
That happened after I submitted the report this morning. I talked with Patty Poyce, who's Director of Marketing and Communications at TCAT. And she had good news about the electric buses, which I did not include in that report. And I'll quote what she said. We now have 4 of the 7 Proterra electric battery buses in service now, and they are performing very well. We brought in a former Proterra mechanic as a consultant, and we expect to get the others into service within the next few months. Our maintenance team has secured contacts to keep supplies and parts coming despite Proterra's Chapter 11 situation. So it's been a problem with those electric buses, but apparently they're making headway in getting them back in service.
Great. Thank you very much. Cynthia, sometimes for water quality, you just provide some sort of update of what's happening between different groups. Anything there?
Not anything definitive to report at this time.
Okay.
Thanks.
The Energy Committee, as I already mentioned, did host a meeting last week. We had represented our local reps from clean energy communities and climate smart communities there. It was really an opportunity for our municipalities to share information. I don't know how many munis we had represented, but quite a few. And you know, we achieved our goal. There seemed to be a thirst for maybe doing this more frequently, to share information, to talk about challenges, to talk about grant opportunities. I think folks know I don't take notes at these meetings. There is a recording. If anyone's interested and wants to see what we talked about, send me an email. I'll send you the recording of the Zoom meeting. So it was well received, and I think we'll probably do something within the first quarter of 2024. The cybersecurity, Kristen, anything?
Nope.
Caitlin, anything on that front?
We have been very busy in Ulysses with a special election. So if anybody wants any fun about special elections, I could be the chair of that committee. I'm hoping you never need to have that fun. But we have not met. But one thing that the town is now pivoting to looking to do with our ARPA money is get our website in ADA compliance. And I wondered if that was something any of your municipalities, I didn't want to go a long conversation, but just, is that something any of your communities have already undertaken? I see not.
Ours is. You could talk to John Little.
Okay.
I think you've had correspondence.
I have.
With
yep.
Right.
Awesome.
Any others have had that?
No, but we're redoing we're going to put up bids to have our website redone this year, next year. So,
and of course, so, thank you. And we did talk about cybersecurity. So again, I know many of you, well, some of you, I think, were probably at the meeting this week or had a rep from your municipality. So, and broadband, I don't know if is there anything else about broadband right now? Joel, did you want to, again, just noting that Nick sent out an update. Joel, did you want to say anything about that?
Other than we've been waiting on the county to see what next steps would be. And so it's nice to hear there's progress being made. There's also concern that the process is unfolding without a whole lot of input other than the steering committee that the county set up. So I'm hoping that we can be, now that we're very interested in the outcome of the RFP process, and what kind of proposals that were ferreted out as a result of it, and what kind of and what those imply regarding, you know, how it could be dealt with going forward. And I'm hoping that we can have more of a role in reviewing those along with rather than after the legislature.
And Joe, were you planning on saying that basically, or following up with Nick by email?
Yeah, we have a letter drafted.
So thank you for encouraging to make sure that there's ongoing communication related to that. Anything else about broadband?
Rod, I'm actually up here. I can update since I
there you are.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick, I didn't see you.
That's okay. Yeah, so since I drafted this, we got responses from all of the bidders for the clarification questions. We're reviewing those presently. We are looking at scheduling a meeting with the state Connect All office, which is the broadband office at the state level, to get a better understanding of how our process can sync up with theirs. And in addition, reviewing if there are any changes to the preferences that we're looking at based on the clarification question. That's the only update since what I drafted here last week. So
any questions for Nick, since I now know he's there?
Well, yeah, Nick, did you happen to see the email I sent this morning? It was about the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program.
I did, and I'm going to be connecting with the agencies that Lisa mentioned there. So yeah, we'll be following up on that.
Yeah, because it would be sort of a companion program to some of the other ones. So, okay, thanks.
Sure.
Anything else for Nick? Okay, moving to emergency planning and preparedness. Robert Lynch did send out an email that got forwarded that he wanted to talk about the municipal cost sharing for the pilot rapid medical response. But before we go there, was there anything else related to that committee, the emergency planning and preparedness, to talk about at TCOG?
Not really, Rod. I don't have any updates from our subcommittee. So
okay.
Thank you.
So Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I would like this to be kind of a roundtable discussion, and fortunately, Rich John, who is the chair of the Public Safety Committee of the County Legislature, has joined us today. And he was the point person behind a resolution which is pending before the legislature right now. He graciously withdrew it from consideration at Tuesday's meeting, but it's likely to come up later on this month. And it would concern cost sharing and the request for a memorandum of understanding to be negotiated with the various municipalities, providing some sort of cost sharing for this pilot rapid medical response system, which I'm sure you're aware of. I'd like Rich John to kind of take over at this point and talk about it.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you for giving me a chance just to speak. I'll be as quick as I can. The point of the resolution is to make sure there is conversation and negotiation between the county and the various other municipalities that will be involved. And there's a few different reasons for that. Certainly, one of them is financial, in that we should try to, in my view, we should try to align the cost in some measure to the municipalities that receive the benefit, and to limit the cost for those municipalities who really aren't seeing that much benefit from it, including those who already have devoted a substantial amount of budget money to ambulance service. But that's not the only reason. Another one is based on governance, that we want to make sure this is a collaborative effort. And if it's just a county program, we're probably going to run it our own way. And I'm not sure that's optimal. I would like to see this be truly an enhancement to the overall services that are out there right now. And a cost share is a way of making sure everybody has skin in the game. I also think behind the cost share, it's critical that we have a memorandum of understanding, because I do not want to see the county put in money and have some of the towns cut their budget to their rescue services, because then we're not really doing an enhancement, we're just doing a shift. And what I believe our citizens need is more service, not less, or not the same. And the memorandum of understanding would address what are the current service levels and provide a commitment from all the players that they're going to at least maintain current services. So what we add from the county is more, not the same or less. I'll stop there.
Okay, so comments, questions, dialogue? Dan.
Yeah, I understand the thinking behind this, and I think it came up earlier in one of our discussions, the need to have a more nuanced approach if we're going to go forward with this program. And by nuanced, I mean recognizing that each town is approaching emergency services differently. And the town of Dryden, for instance, puts over $1 million into our ambulance services. A considerable part of our budget goes into that. And other towns might not do as much. Other towns might not have as much money to put in. So it makes sense to me that this sort of negotiation could take place. I think, Rich, what might be helpful is if the county made it clear that you're not going to be too demanding on these towns, but you want some sort of commitment from the towns to maintain what they currently offer. I think what was causing a little fear here is that it might be onerous. It might be, some need for a new taxation in the town to maintain this relationship. I think if the county approached this as more of a benefactor or a program that's going to have money behind it, I think that you might get a better conversation going with the individual towns.
Dan, your point is a good one. Just for everybody's, I assume everybody knows this, but the county has put new money into this for 2024. We've put in half the cost into our budget. We put the other half into contingency. And the thinking behind that was that there would be a negotiation, there would be a discussion, but the county is committed to doing this. And I think to a member of the legislature, and including the city reps, that where you'd say, oh, this is a city town issue. It's not. That we're trying to see this as one county, and the county is committed to this and would like to see it launch even before we see the grant money. And that's why we put it in our budget, because we want to do this and we want to put in new service. So that's there. We put in half. We put the other half in contingency. Is that locked in? Is that the amount that the towns need to pay? I don't think so. I think that's the subject of the negotiation. And in fact, across the table from me is Dan Klein, who has a different view on percentage. Let's have that conversation, right? We certainly don't want it to be a financial killer for any town, but we want everybody playing, is my view.
Dan, did you have a, and Caitlin, I'll get right back to you. It's not Kristen, it's Caitlin.
There was one other small thing I wanted to mention. I think that an additional benefit of what Rich is proposing is the educational element, where we all start to realize what is happening with this service and the funding shortfalls and the communication that would occur. The folks that do are terrific, and I think the amount of information that they can bring to bear would be very helpful for town officials to sit down with. And what they're proposing is not a simple thing. If these MOUs are probably going to take a lot of work to get straight and get understood. And so they're proposing to put a lot of skin in the game in terms of presenting information. And I see a benefit in that.
So we'll go to Caitlin next.
Thank you. I think it's great that we've gotten to a point where we're even having this conversation. So I really appreciate it. I know that there's a lot of hard work that has gotten to this point. I think one question that's going to need to be answered in this is the differentiation, as was raised before, about the communities who are already paying in for mutual aid services, EMS services, and the ones who are not. Because in Ulysses, we have our emergency services are growing at a faster rate of what we need to pay to have them than my tax base is growing. And so one of two things has to happen. I have to start drawing down on my fund balance, or we're going to have to start cutting services because we can't see under the tax cap, or we're going to have to start overriding the tax cap. And I know that that's a reasonable thing to have to do, but it doesn't feel like a sustainable model. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that, but in order for me to go sell this to my community, I'm going to need to hear and explain why, frankly, the city of Ithaca doesn't pay in taxes for EMS services, and the town of Ulysses does. And so again, this is not me saying I'm trying to torpedo this. I want to be a player, and I want Ulysses to be a player at the table, and I want to support this initiative. But that question will need to be answered if I can go persuade Ulysses to pay in financially. So having that nuance worked out, again, want to participate, think it's great that we've gotten to this point. Clearly, these kinds of services need to be on a scaled basis because we can't afford to do them independently. But how do I explain that, you know, the biggest entity in Tompkins County, beyond the county, isn't paying in and Ulysses residents are? So how do we figure out that balance? I think is really important.
Just for clarity, we are paying in. I mean, we're funding half and we've already committed to that right now. And we put the other half in contingency. So the county's playing.
No, not the county, the city.
Oh, okay.
Other than the county, because for instance, my residents know that we pay into Trumansburg EMS for services, and they're a phenomenal group. But we know that our ambulances are going down and backing up the city, and we know the city taxpayers are not paying EMS taxation essentially for services because of the relationship with banks, and I get that.
Yeah, they will be paying here.
Yeah. Right, and so that's where I'm going to need to be able to show that the city is an active player in order for me to sell it to Ulysses.
Yeah, all the city taxpayers who pay county tax, which is all of them, are paying. So they're certainly paying in that one half. But let's have the negotiation and see if there's an appropriate amount for the city to pay above that one half in county tax. Yeah.
Okay, let's get some more on the table, and then Rich and Dan may have want to respond, but we'll go to Joel and then Rorden.
One of the things that complicates this is that for some towns, the municipality is not the provider of the volunteer services, and that's the case in Danby because of the fire district is its own taxing entity. So that means that the what you were alluding to Rich earlier with the not wanting to shift from one having this new service not be seen as an opportunity to sort of reduce the local component, having skin in the game, as you put it. The municipality would be the one with the skin, but the provider of the service is not the one who would be affected by it. So that's a complication. I think that's not the case in every municipality. I know some towns have that it's a municipally provided volunteer service or done by contract. But either way, the money flows through the municipality. Not the case if you have a fire district. Just something to keep in mind, the incentives and the disincentives don't align in our case. And we and Danby are very supportive of this initiative and willing to entertain, at least paying for it in part.
Rorden?
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Brittany, can you let me share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to.
But it's not mine. It's the one that just joined. It should say Village of Trumansburg.
Oh, it just says Rorden Heart. Hang on one second. There's going to be 2 Rorden Hearts here.
Yeah, I'm on an iPad. I'm speaking on an iPad, but I want to share a screen from my desktop. So obviously everyone here knows that I could spend way too long talking about this. I want to be, I'm appreciative and thankful to all of the members of the legislature for being willing to, I think finally, and probably overdue, address this issue in a meaningful way. I think that Caitlin mentioned we just had a referendum here in Ulysses where the voters in their infinite wisdom decided that perfect was in fact the enemy of good, and I don't want that to happen here. I think doing something that may prove to be imperfect but is nevertheless doing something is better than, especially in this case, doing nothing. So I want to state that unequivocally. Thank you to the county for being willing to tackle this issue. I do, however, want to make a couple of quick points. One is I like the idea of a collaborative effort. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I think the Health Consortium is a fantastic model for doing something kind of out of the box that's very, very large. We might find ourselves in a position sometime in the next decade or so where we need a consortium style entity to run emergency services in the Finger Lakes. That's just a reality. So if we can kind of begin to think about what that might look like, how do we be leaders in that potential future scenario rather than being forced into some type of a relationship with other providers that we might not like, both public and private sector. There are those conversations kind of simmering out there about who might become, quote, in control of EMS in the Finger Lakes. And I'm nervous about where that could go if we're not directly involved. So I like the collaborative effort. I am concerned about what the cost share will look like in dollars and cents, particularly to the smaller municipalities that don't already have the funding or the availability of assets to support a service, or perhaps they would have already begun to do so themselves. And if it's, I think did I hear that Dan Klein is here?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Dan. Can't really see on the screen. You know, some of the ideas I've heard, and I think Dan and I spoke a few weeks ago about an idea where the cost share is staggered and structured based on certain criteria. I think that's very interesting. And I think that potentially you could get municipalities like Dryden, Trumansburg, and Ulysses to potentially become proponents of those kinds of things. Again, depending on how it's structured. There's one thing though I need to push back, Rich, and I do this respectfully but firmly. I need to push back on this notion of this service potentially not benefiting certain areas of the community. And I'm going to share a map if my screen sharing works. Hopefully everybody can see it. You've all seen a map of the calls in the county provided by all of the agencies. This map, and I hope everyone can see it, this map is EMS calls with bangs removed so that you can see where the Village of Trumansburg in yellow, the Dryden ambulance being this kind of purplish, bluish, grayish dot, and then Groton is in the black dots. A significant, and by significant, I mean 25 to 30% of Dryden ambulances calls are going into the city of Ithaca. Village of Trumansburg EMS, we're not that high. It's probably more like 8 to 10%. There's a significant amount of taxpayer dollars from our municipalities going to pay for EMS services in the city of Ithaca. The city of Ithaca is fortunate. I don't blame them in any way, shape, or form for the fact that they have a 50-year relationship with a for-profit agency, so they don't have to stand up an EMS service. But the idea that a rescue-based service which will alleviate pressure from bangs to respond rurally, which will then allow bangs to stay home in the city of Ithaca more often, which will then allow, like dominoes, Dryden Ambulance and Trumansburg EMS to stay in our areas more often, is just very, very important to grasp. And so I think the elephant in the room is, how do we engage the city of Ithaca proper to participate in this outside of, well, every resident of the city will pay through their county taxes? I think it's a bigger issue than this. We had similar conversations surrounding the Ithaca Police Department and the burden that it would put on the Sheriff's Department if IPD could no longer take calls at all. This is a very similar topic. It's just not law enforcement. It's EMS. So I share this map. DOER put this together for us about a month ago to kind of highlight how important it is that we look at this whole thing as an interconnected network. And there are municipalities, the city being one, which are benefiting from the ambulance services of other municipalities without any intermunicipal agreement or compensation. And so if the county can step into a role somehow, and again, I haven't quite figured out what this looks like, but if the county can step into a role somehow, like the consortium, to find a way to make this all work better in a more equitable fashion for those of us who do have, $1.3 million EMS department budgets, then I think that would be That would kind of shore up the holes in all of this conversation and also make it more palatable to any of the rural towns that might have to come up with some money of their own to make sure that the county service, which is underpinning all of the rest of this, is well funded. And so thank you.
And Rorden, can you share that map?
The map? Sure.
Yeah, okay. Before Rich and Dan maybe weigh in again, any other comments from members? And I see some other, so Lisa, I said that you might show up later in the meeting, so Lisa Holmes is here. And I think I saw another county legislator here as well. So other comments, questions, dialogue? Robert.
I had a question concerning timing on this because we're talking about the 2024 budget where half of the money would be county provided and the other half would be a contingency, which is hoped that the municipalities will help contribute to that. Aside from, the ability or the willingness of the municipalities to pay, there's a timing question because the towns have already set their budgets. And we've got a very tight budget, as I described to the legislature. I won't go into it again. But I mean, if it's going to be 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, I don't know where that money is going to come from in Enfield. And I presume other towns are going to be in the same situation. So what is the timing issue here?
Rod, is it okay to respond at this point?
Sure.
Robert, I think you make a really good point. And to some extent, perhaps the ship has sailed for 2024. The concern with the legislature, if I can speak for my colleagues, is precedent. That if we just say, all right, let's start, and we'll try to figure it out later, in 2025, at least one town is going to say, no, it worked pretty well in 24. We have the money sitting in our contingency to pay the other half. I believe it's critical to our residents that we launch in 24. And I would defer to Lisa if she comes back from negotiation and says, we, the county, need to pay 24, but we have commitment for 25. That's a fair deal in my mind. So we could get it done. We could get it started. And I did want to respond to Rorden's map, which is compelling. And Rorden, I'd suggest you bring that to the negotiation and show it to everybody and argue from it. I think there's another map that is response times. And the response times would show a very different picture. And there's got to be a big argument about that. That's, I think, part of what the negotiation has to get through. And my sense is that when we get to the end of the negotiation, it may have been an ugly process, but I'm hopeful that there would be some agreement that, yeah, there is a cost share formula that is good enough. And, maybe Dan is heading in the right direction with what he's proposed. I don't know. But that's what the negotiation would tell us. Thanks. Dan, did you want to jump in?
I do want to get in the queue, but there are other people ahead of me.
And I think I saw Annie's hand next, and then we'll go back to Joel, and then Dan, we'll give you a chance.
Thanks, Rod, and thanks to TCOG for letting me speak about this. So, as might have been said already, I believe the county legislators are split on whether we want the municipalities to cost share or in what format. I think definitely, to me, 2024 is off the table. That's just me. But after that, I also we'll see what happens, but I also don't think we can mandate this. So yes, it would be an opt-in agreement or some type of consortium type thing. I hadn't heard that before. I also see this as a preliminary, it is a pilot program, and so that this is probably going to be expanded later. So there is going to be time later to figure out, okay, how is this helping municipalities? Would we want to do some type of cost share? I also wanted to mention that, as was said, that the city of Ithaca residents pay in county tax. Well, so do the town of Ulysses. residents also pay into the county tax, plus they pay for their ambulance and fire departments. So asking them to chip in more at this point just seems, a little bit unfair. And so I think it would take a long time to try and figure out something equitable. I don't think this is something we can figure out in a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. What would be the fairest thing? So thanks for letting me chime in.
Okay, Annie, Joel?
Just liking seeking clarity on what the role of the grant money was in the first year. I know that the purchase of the vehicles was part of that, and the personnel. Is it the operating costs that we're looking at trying to cost share?
Yes.
And I see Lisa unmuted. Lisa, did you want to say more about that?
Yes. So the grant, the Shared Services Initiative grant, on which everyone will be voting next Monday, if we were to get all of that grant as well as the local government efficiency grant, I believe those two grants have been for 1 year only in 2024. So if that's the case, then we would have that time available to us for these further conversations and negotiations. If we don't receive the grant or receive it in part, we do have the funding that the county has committed in its budget to cover those gaps. So but again, that is only for that 1 year of the program.
Dan, did you? Let's give you a chance to say something, and then we'll go back to Gordon.
Thank you. I'm very heartened by the discussion I'm hearing today, because the first wave of responses to this was, we don't want to pay anything. So I'm really glad to hear that there's some openness to discussing a cost sharing. I think about the partnerships that we do that are successful. So Gordon mentioned the healthcare consortium, and that's a success that we all agree with. I look to the recreation partnership as maybe a closer model to what I'm interested in. The exact formula there wouldn't work here, but the recreation partnership is paid for a quarter by the county, a quarter by the city, a quarter by the town of Ithaca, and a quarter by all the other towns together that are parts of it. That's a beautiful idea to me. That's like a really nice way to spread everything out. Everyone gets benefit from it. I heard earlier in today's discussion from your consultants about the code enforcement idea. And that was stated that would not be a county program in terms of county paying for it. The county might take a large role in it, but not exclusively. The towns would have their role as well. I also heard mentioned about the broadband project, which is being paid for entirely by the county. And that's kind of a great example of the difference. Is if it's a county program, then the county will do what it does. But if it's a cost share program, then everyone's got a seat at the table. Everyone's got some say in how the program would actually work. So the only other thing I want to say is, I know that some of the towns were starting to work on resolutions to address the cost sharing idea. I guess I would ask the towns to hold off on those resolutions until the county actually puts forth a formal request to the towns, because we haven't done that yet. And hopefully that's coming soon. And I believe that there's a good chance in those options, you'll see some much lower cost options than you saw in the first set of information that went out. Thank you.
Gordon?
Yeah, just an idea that has come to me in the last 90 seconds. So take that for what it's worth. I'm wondering if, and at the risk of doing what people accuse electeds of always doing, which is kicking the can to a committee, is there something we might consider doing, or would the county be willing to consider structuring a formalized conversation of some kind with all 17 Tompkins County entities to kind of think through how could we structure something bigger than from a financial standpoint, something that's more comprehensive and a little bit more formalized than just MOUs that a future elected body from a certain board could choose not to renew for the following year. I'm using the consortium as an example. 2008, TCOG got a grant Don Barber chaired a committee. We hired Losi and Cahill out of Syracuse, and they basically said, how would we set this thing up? So is there a version of this where, I don't know if it's through Public Safety Committee or just one or two legislators and then a representative from each of the municipalities and each of the agencies, plus someone from DOER, really kind of think about how do we want to structure this from a cost share perspective going forward? What if we find ourselves in a situation where we have to dramatically expand services at some time in the future? What if, those of you who aren't aware, AMR, a large commercial provider, pulled out of Cayuga County, that will maybe not immediately, but likely in the future start to draw services into Cayuga County from the town of from Dryden Ambulance in particular, as well as Cortland County. Take a kind of a regional look at this and say, how are we going to flex if and or when we have to grow this program, when we don't have volunteers, or if 2 generations from now, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, 2 generations from now, Bang's Ambulance doesn't exist because of whatever reason. How are we going to provide this essential service to our residents under any circumstance? And I wonder if this conversation about the rapid medical response should really be looked at as the match to light a much larger conversation, with kind of a generational perspective for this service. So that was a statement that was really a question.
We'll let that absorb for a minute. I'll go to the hands raised, and then others might want to respond to what Gordon just put on the table. Joel?
Well, picking up on what Gordon just said, I had communication recently, I think probably everybody else has too, from Anna Kellis indicating that she has at the state level tried to focus some attention on this issue and is in the stage of thinking about what kind of legislative initiative might be had at the state level to address a problem that's much broader than our situation here in Tompkins County. And picking up on what you just said, Roy, it seems like that we ought to have a conversation that involves our state legislators as well.
Well, if there was any task force, I think there's probably a number of conversations that would,
for sure,
information gathering. Lee?
I think Rorden got off into an area that's been in the back of my mind for a while. And Michael Steitley and I recently had a conversation about this. And there is a huge educational component that I think that collectively the municipalities need to be looking at, that really goes to the expenditures that are being made by our local governments, fire districts, municipal governments, for all these emergency services. You would be overwhelmed if you saw those numbers in a spreadsheet. And again, second point that was just made with Anna Kellis, we've been involved in some conversations there about some initiatives she'd like to get started. One of the things that's coming down the line from the Albany level is that there is a strong move afoot to define emergency medical services as an essential service. That could have some significant implications and mandates coming down to local governments if that were to be done by the state legislature and signed by the governor. Third thing is that I chaired a meeting Saturday morning up in Albany of the major state fire associations on legislative agendas. 20 years ago, when I joined that group, I was the youngest person in the room. Saturday morning, I was still the youngest person in that room 20 years later. And that is an indication of a problem that right now it's manifesting in EMS. We're not that far away from seeing it in the whole fire service. And so really, I think to Rorden's point, there's a big conversation that needs to move forward. There's much more coming at us. It's most obvious in EMS now. It's going to be happening in fire, and it's going to come directly back to all of our budgets by the time we get done. Just a general thought I wanted to express.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, just quickly. So this conversation, this broader conversation is sort of happening right now. I mean, let's remember this idea for reform came out of this group, out of TCOG, and working with various student groups that I've been affiliated with to do the studies. So we're having this networking going ready. I agree with Gordon, a bigger conversation needs to happen, but I would caution against making it one or the other. I think that what the county's proposing should go forward. We can't wait. And we should start having these individual conversations and drafting these MOUs and looking at how those would work as soon as possible, while having this other broader conversation about what our model will look like down the road, and bringing together reps from the various towns, not unlike what we're doing right now, but perhaps more formally. I think that's a fine idea, but I don't think we should wait, because we have, I mean, there's a reason why we're talking about this right now. There's an urgency here. And that's all I would, just remind us of. We can't delay.
Cynthia?
Yes, I have not been active in this conversation. I've been really sort of gleaning off of the information shared through these meetings. I know Roden and I have had a couple conversations on the side a few months ago, at least. I think the thing from the city to keep in mind is that we are going through a fantastic amount of transition. We did last night appoint a city manager who will be taking charge as of January 1st. We are retiring our controller, who I believe will be leaving. I don't believe we have a new controller that has been hired yet, so our controller will be rotating out as well. We have a new council that will be coming in as of January 1st, 5 new members of council. So our organization has not been giving this the attention that I think it deserves. I think it will take some time for it to receive that level of attention. And so I recognize and I appreciate the disparity that people are feeling in terms of city's lack of tax contribution because of its relationship with Bangs Ambulance, and the reimbursement through insurance and others that Bangs is able to utilize for those for those calls. So I just want to say that I don't believe the city is in a position to respond as quickly to enter into either an MOU or commitment with regards to cost sharing at this time. And it looking into a broader, more structured, formal conversation with all the municipalities, of course, makes a lot of sense, but being able to initiate and make plans immediately is something that has to be done simultaneously.
Note taken, Cynthia. I do know I'm paying attention to the time. Rich and Dan, maybe this is a question for you. So I forget which committee it is at the county that's going to continue this discussion. Is there an openness to invite in some of the voices that we've just heard to figure out what some next steps might be?
Certainly, the Public Safety Committee has been talking about this, and we've had lots of visits from a lot of people on screen here. And it's fine to have those conversations continue, but I think it's time to have something outside of public safety, a direct conversation. That's the purpose really behind the resolution, is to say, let's sit down at a table with everybody and have, that discussion. And certainly it's not, I agree with Roden that if you look across the state, county on county, there's great change happening. And Tompkins County will follow that path as well, I believe. The county will become more involved in these emergency services. It's just the way of the world. But I agree with Dan. Let's do the immediate issue. Let's get that set up so we address the response time issues that we have right now. And it should lead into the broader discussion year on year, because we need that too. I agree, but I think it's not necessarily public safety. I think it's a negotiation, with Lisa representing the county. But I'm happy to be involved. However, I really believe we need to do this, and we need to do it now. But if we just keep coming back to the Public Safety Committee with individual towns talking to us, I don't know that we get there, at least not in the time frame we want.
So Lisa, I don't know what it would look like for someone to pull together such a meeting that represents all the municipalities to have this discussion? Thoughts about that? And maybe that's putting you too much on the spot. We don't have to figure this out right now.
It's certainly something that we could do. We'd probably be looking at very early on in the new year.
Okay, that'd be great. So is there anything else right now to say about this? So we've
I
had
just
a,
want to thank everybody for participating in this, including our county legislators and Legislator Corman and Legislator Shurtleff. I think it's been very productive.
yes, it's been a very productive meeting all around. We touched on lots of topics. So turning to 2024, I am suggesting that we just follow the schedule we had for 2023. I misspoke before, so that would mean our first meeting would be actually January 25th, not January 26th. So does it work to continue with the fourth Thursday every other month? Because we did every other month, so committees can meet in the intervening months. The exception to that is we tend not to meet late November and combine sort of a November and December meeting by meeting the first Thursday of December. So if I looked at the calendar correctly, it would be January 25th, March 28th, May 23rd, July 25th, September 26th, and December 5th. Does that work for folks? And so why don't we at least start with no? So it sounds like that's a tentative yes. And so that would mean our next meeting would be January 25th. So is there anything else we need to talk about today? Or just quick updates that people didn't have a chance to mention?
I have one update, if I may. Last meeting, you recall, we passed a resolution urging Governor Hochul to veto the bill that would move local elections from odd numbered years to even number years. There has still not been a signature or veto on that. The governor has 2 years to end the act. I don't even know if that bill has been presented to her yet to sign, but just as an update, there's nothing to update you on.
Okay. Anything else like that? Some quick updates? Going once, going twice. We will adjourn the meeting at 4:49. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, Cynthia.